Now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Meet the PhD series. And today it's our episode number 5. And today we have with us Dr. Marlene Salgado. So, hi, Marlene. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Shaili. It's a pleasure to be here.
Same. It's a pleasure to interview you. And I know her personally through the master's program that we did. And she has supported me a lot during my master's. I remember like going to her and showing her presentations and she telling me that, you need to edit this, edit that, but not in a very bossy way. I remember how sweetly she told me that this is how you should structure your thoughts and all these things. So she's been a mentor to me. Thanks, Marlene, because you supported me a lot in yeah.
It's
It's a
mutual.
pleasure to have a mentor who understands you, like not an official one, but as a friend. So thank you so much. And thanks for coming to the interview today. Um, so just to tell you more about Marlene, she did her PhD at the University of Strasbourg, which is in the city Strasbourg, and that is in France. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right because it is supposed to be Strasbourg. How do you pronounce it?
Strasbourg, the French way, I think.
Yeah, and she recently defended her PhD in the field neurosciences, and I'm more than delighted to know about her experiences and insights. So, Marlene, let us start the interview. So, the first question I want to ask you here is that. What was the field and department that you were pursuing your PhD in, just to tell people about the graduate program? And also, what is the research questions that you were trying to answer in your PhD?
The main field of my PhD is in neuroscience.
Yeah.
The in the neuroscience field is very broad, and I went into two. I focused on two aspects. One was the neuroimmunology, and the other one is pain.
Okay.
And so the research question I was, my PhD was on, was how interactions between stress and pain affect the brain development, and how this is mediated by a peptide called vasoactive intestinal peptide, or VIP.
Okay, that's very interesting. So I am also working on pain, and it's good to connect at that level too. Okay, interesting. And so let us, tell us why did you choose this field, and what was the moment like when you decided to pursue your PhD in this field?
I always loved science. I love biology, chemistry, and my bachelor's, the topic was the major was biochemistry, and biochemistry, I love it, but it's also very broad. So I started studying a bit psychology, neuroscience, and it just caught me.
Yes. Okay.
And
yeah, and the second sub part to this is that just a moment here. Yeah, what was the moment like when you decided to pursue your PhD in this field?
After my bachelor's, I worked in a laboratory as a technician, and it was an amazing experience. It was research based, and also a bit of management of the lab. And this lab was immunology, so that's also where the interest in immunology started also coming from me. But while the technique, I love I love doing experiments. I love this part of research. I also wanted to. I had a lot of ideas basically, and I discussed with my at the time there were postdocs or PhDs in the lab. I was a younger one, and they had ideas and they tried something to do it. And in my position, I wasn't able to try experiments like that. I had to have certain deadlines, which is normal. And I realized that I wanted to not only do the technical aspect, but also discuss and create ideas, try them, And that's how I started. So I went to do a master's in France, the Jane master that we both went to.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, I loved it, and I wanted to continue. It was a great start for the research experience, and I wanted to continue that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the whole master's program gave us a lot of perspective because we got exposure from different laboratories in different countries. So that was a that was a plus point of this program. Yeah. And I mean, somebody who did a PhD, it's kind of obvious that they like research. So, but want to know from you that do you like research in general and what sparked your interest in research?
Yeah, research is like I think the expression is a double-edged sword. I love
Yeah.
research. I love it. That's why I'm here. But it's true. It has its tough parts where the research has a bit of a mystery where uh, you might not find out what you will have, or you don't have the results you want. So it's a bit risky. But
Yeah.
the reason why me and I'm sure a lot of other PhD students are here is because we do, even though there's the risk, we also love trying things and studying things.
Mhm.
And if you have an idea, you can look up, for example, something that I really um, learned learned to do it during the PhD was to go back to the literature, because you say, "Oh, I have this idea," and then
Mhm.
you go back to the literature and you say, "Oh, somebody else already had it, or
That's
somebody
fun.
had similar idea, and how do they approach it? What
Mhm.
type of model they use?" And it's a whole process that it's a lot of hard work. And but yeah, it's fascinating in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. And you briefly just, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I'm
Yeah, I was just saying that you briefly mentioned about your career paths. You mentioned about your major in bachelor's, and then you also mentioned about your master's. But would you like to tell us more in detail about your career trajectory?
of course, and I think this is a very important point that I always talk a lot about with students, because we never have the same path, and it's very important. Some people, I think, have, since they were younger, they have this field that they follow, and they
Yeah.
can have early on in their career, they can have a lot of success because they build up on that. My career path is a bit different because it's a bit more mixed. I did a bachelor in the US in biochemistry,
Yeah.
and it was the university was liberal arts college, which means I
Mhm.
didn't only study biochemistry. I had to study economics. I had to study only the last year. It was really focused on the biochemistry, but the other years I
Mhm.
studied a lot of different courses. And at times I was a bit confusing because my colleagues in other countries were really focused on their field, and
Yeah.
I was still learning about everything, not everything, but different the social sciences, humanities, science. So it was very enriching. Um, but I always loved science. So that's why I applied for a job at a laboratory in Chicago in immunology. So it was a field that I knew a little bit about, and I went for it, and I just, on my own, I studied all the immunologics. I only learned a bit in class. So I
Mhm.
really learned a lot about immunology. It was mostly about the research there was vaccines and the influenza vaccines mostly, and how antibodies are created, which is really relevant for now for
Yeah.
the
This is
COVID
very.
situation. So it was really interesting being in immunology lab, and
Mhm.
and at the back of my mind, I've done a bit of research in the last year of my bachelor's degree in neuroscience. So I still had in the back of my mind neuroscience, and I realized that the immunology system and the nervous system have a lot of similarities in the
Yeah.
the types of cells, the way they function. It's really interesting how they coincide. And they also have a lot of interactions. So that just fascinated me. And yeah, so that's why I went to do a master's in. I wasn't sure in the US. The system is that you don't apply for a master's. You do mostly a longer PhD, which is normally 2 years, 3 years of classes, research combined, which is a bit the master, and then pure research the last few years. But I had the idea to go to Europe, so that's why I looked in Europe and I found this master program, and I arrived in Europe. During the masters, I don't know if you've introduced a masters, but it's
I guess introduce it because I haven't done that in detail, so you can definitely do that. Yeah,
I can do briefly. It's a master's. It's in France, but it's a collaboration between France, Germany, and Switzerland. And the students, the master is in English, and it's 15 to 20 students, more or less, of different nationalities. And it's a year, now it's a year and a half of classes and internships, and the last few months is a research internship. And it's very international, and we take classes in different locations. So it's very enriching. And for the last, I had 9-month internship at the time, and it was in Basel, in Switzerland. And I went to a neuroimmunology lab.
Nice.
And so from there, I dived into the research. I loved it, and then I took. We can talk about this after. I took a few months off, and then I went to pursue my PhD back in France.
That's interesting because neuroimmunology is something that even I love. It's a very interesting field, and during my bachelor's also, how I was introduced to more neuroscience research was through the interaction between neuroendocrine and immune system. So I was taken back in time when you were talking about neuroimmunology. And are you there still? Oh, yeah.
I'm here.
For just a few seconds. Okay. So, talking about our favorite topics, just want to ask you here. So, who's your role model in the field of neurosciences?
I have a lot.
But yeah, a few.
I always loved, more than neuroscience, I loved when I was in the bachelor's, Mendel for genetics. This is one thing that sparked my passion for how did he figure out genetics?
Yeah, his work is amazing. Yeah. I mean, although it didn't get recognized for a very long time, but later when people did recognize it, it was just way too insightful for everybody to. Yeah, he was just too fast for his time. Yeah. So, would you like to tell us what is a typical day of a neuroscience PhD student? Because, like, I am currently doing my PhD, which is on a focus on neuroimaging. So I'm sure we have a different type of day when it comes to like more of molecular techniques. So how do you like usually have a typical day in the lab?
For the lab, it's I schedule my days. Well, I used to schedule my days around through my experiments. I was working with mice. So, and I was also doing behavior. So the behavioral experiments for consistency always have to be done at the same time because the light dark cycle in mice affects. So it always has to be done at the same time. Yeah. So normally it will come to the lab. I would normally the night before you prepare. You have to you know that if you need certain chemicals, the day before, I normally had like made a before leaving, make sure that I had all the materials ready, because you cannot start, and it happens to every PhD student that you miss a chemical and you cannot start your experiment because so you need to go find it. So it's important to check that you have all the materials. So in the morning, setting up and starting my experiment, and then I would have you have sometimes an hour, or I had a lot. Molecular biology has a lot of incubation times. So during these incubation times, you answer emails. Sometimes you can read. If you have a discussion with your PI, you can prepare and like for results. It's also good to integrate the results, so you can work on the results. You can talk with colleagues, because that's something that I also learn. You can go take a coffee, and sometimes you have a thought in your mind and you're like, I don't know how to do this, or I'm thinking about this, and you meet someone in the hall. You don't talk very, I think scientists don't, uh, we're all in our little world, but sometimes we meet and we talk, and it's and you can say, I have this, and they're like, oh, have you talked to this person, they have this, or maybe you should try to do this, and this is really helpful.
True. That's a very
And
good tip.
then
Yeah.
so I was very I was always very in between experiments and writing or reading, and it went, my day went by very fast.
Yeah,
And
experiment.
it was I liked it that way. I think it's also it was me who decided more or less what time the experiments went, and I had to do it. And you also had to for me, I also had to sometimes go in the weekends. So I also planned a lot to do a lot more in the weekdays, and for the weekends I would schedule to try to come only for the chunks of time that there were the experiments that have to continue this timeline.
That's very important, because then the part of taking breaks is also important, right? For the balance that we need for the PhD. Yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely have more questions coming up on that in the later part of the interview. So now the question is that what sort of support would you seek from your friends and family who are not from the academic background?
I so I I think when I was working in the lab in Chicago, I noticed that some people were a bit more stressed than others, and they were all older than me at the time. So I was like, why are they're both doing the same? Why are they more stressed? And I realized that
Yeah.
when I looked and I also interacted with them, I get to know them. I realized that the people who were a bit less stressed, or we were all stressed at some point, but who seemed to enjoy more being in the lab, have this a bit, what I saw in my eyes at the time, more balance, were people who also had you could talk about with them other things not related to lab, and this was because they had strong relationships also outside the lab, and other people were a bit more stressed because they could only talk about lab, and that's also fine. But I was looking to be more on the other side, so I tried to keep my friends and family close, and I talked to them about lab, but I also tried to ask them, like, tell me what's going on in the real world. Or not the real world, but I'm a curious person, so I love talking to someone about something that I'm not necessarily um, what's that I'm not expert about, and it's something new. I like listen to that, so that also distracts me. And yeah, for me it's an important sometimes it's not possible because you have a lot of work. And you have to sometimes, on the other side of that, sometimes you have to ask um, I cannot be so present with you, or cannot answer. I cannot be on the phone, for example, a lot these weeks. I'm very busy. But if you once in a while we can text, or we can have a few minute call on the weekend, that would be really nice, and they understand.
That's
It's
good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree on this because sometimes when we have to like talk to somebody, it's not just about their time, it's also about how much of attention they are about to give you, right? And that matters more. Maybe you're sitting with somebody for 1 hour, but you still have their attention for 10 minutes, then it's better to have a 10-minute thing and have their 100% attention, right? So that's a very important point there.
and I think there's for me, and I think this is true for other people. The PhD is not 100% stress 100% of the time. It's also comes like this. So sometimes you have a bit more time to spend with them, or to, and then you give it. And sometimes you have to ask also, sorry, this week I for me, I don't know if it's the case, but sometimes people look at me crazy when I say I have to go work on the weekend, and why? And I'm like, I have to. It,
Yeah.
I know I have to, and if they don't understand, it's okay. But it's sometimes for me on my own to be like, I have to do this, and it's just it's like this, and I have to ask for this, and yeah, the people who care about you will understand. And
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good filter there. So, yeah. And so, this is a different type of question here. So, how many places did you apply to for before getting accepted for the PhD position that you had?
for the well, this is, I think I said earlier that I was gonna come back to this. So when I
Yeah.
was in Switzerland, I did the my long internship there, and
Mhm.
I was applying for a PhD position to continue in the lab, and then it didn't work out because I was coming from a French master, and the requirements were not the same for
Mhm.
the Swiss master to graduate. They have a different schedule. They have different rules. So it was a bit of a conflict. And then, so that's the first place I was applying to. And we also needed funding, and there was no funding available at the time. So it just wasn't, it wasn't the time. Uh, so after that, I wasn't, I applied to, so that was on that year, I applied only to the same lab.
Mhm.
But before coming to the master, I also applied there to some PhDs before because the US system, you don't apply to the master. I applied to a PhD in Geneva, and I applied to uh, PhDs in the US. So I was applying in my dream school is Brown.
Okay.
In the it was a bit of a high reach, but it was just because I loved it, and I didn't get in, but it's okay. It all worked out for the better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and we know it now. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So in total, I applied to, yeah, like 3 or 4 positions in
Mhm.
different time points.
Yeah, I mean, the aim for me to ask this question was to show people that it's not that the only one position that we apply to, we always get there. I mean, some lucky ones are like that, but most of us fall into this category where we have applied to like tens or 15s of these schools, and then we get into one of those or two of those. So it's to show that, failure is a part of it, but then you need to just keep moving forward and not leave it there, like, and whatever you get at the end is best for you, as you mentioned. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was like this. I also, and maybe it's also important because I was sure that I was gonna get the position in Switzerland. I didn't. I was
Mm-hmm.
a bit um it was a tough period because I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Everything wasn't
So
dark,
doubt
and it
yourself,
didn't.
right?
And
Yeah.
so just by chance of life, I took a few months off, and I arrived at the right place. But it was at the moment, in this moment, that it didn't make sense, and after it went, it arrived. It's
True.
part of
Yeah. I mean, when
life.
we are in that moment, things really don't make sense. But later, when we retrospectively look back, then we see why it was like that.